So there was that bad news. Bundy, we just got the word. I don't know the details of it. I know he'd had some major health problems over the years. Very, very heavy. Obviously, that's never a good thing. He was 61 years old, and he was a very memorable character, unique look, huge guy, probably 6'5", and I'm gonna guess way over 400 pounds. He was a good high school heavyweight wrestler in New Jersey, not a state champion, but placed, I think, in the state. And then Larry Sharp started him in pro wrestling. And I remember him as Chris Pallies, as a enhancement guy on WWE television with the long, dark hair. And then he went to Dallas, where he was Big Daddy Bundy and King Kong Bundy. And that's where he got his first break. And the one thing about him was he moved pretty well for a guy. Just the size alone in that era was enough to kind of get him up and going. But his promos were really good in Dallas, which fit in. He started out as a babyface, friends of the Von Erichs, and then he turned on the Von Erichs and went with Gary Hart and Armand Hussein, and then he turned on Gary Hart and Armand Hussein, but stayed a villain. And he worked with all the Von Erichs, and he was actually the opponent for Fritz Von Erich in Fritz's original retirement match, although Fritz did come out of retirement, which was at Texas Stadium. He still had hair then, and I don't remember how he lost his hair, but I remember then he went to Mid-South Wrestling and got a big push there, but he was bald by this point. He did that's where the 5-count gimmick came, which I believe was the idea of Jim Ross to differentiate him. And he later took that 5-count gimmick to WWE. And this was the period when their business started getting kind of cold, because JYD was wrestling Bundy and Kamala, and these matches were atrocious, and business was going down at that point. And then Bundy, of course, he went to Memphis for a while with Lawler, did well there with Jimmy Hart as his manager. Went to WWF, had the big run there. Bundy and Stud tag team, working with Andre the Giant. Of course, WrestleMania 2, the cage match with Hulk Hogan after they did the injury angle. And he worked there for a while, and then he got out of business for a long time. Didn't really like things. Got out, did a comeback in the mid-90s, and excuse me, the comeback, I remember with the comeback, it was pretty tough, because he had lost much of his mobility, and he really didn't get over. They tried to bring back, and they wanted to program him with Undertaker, and I think they did some stuff with him and Undertaker, but it was pretty bad. And then he pretty much was out of the business. And that was, kind of it for him. But he was a real outspoken guy if you talk to him. The look was real memorable. He was a big star when as part of the expansion. Worked with all the top baby faces and all that.
Well, looks here that Kevin Von Erich beat Bundy in the hair match.
Is that what it was? I just remember he had the full head of hair, and then he was bald, and I don't remember exactly what happened.
He was like Kurt Angle. He got his head shaved, and it never grew back.
Right. Yeah, I'll tell you what, he looked, as far as being a star, he looked so much better with a bald head. I mean, as with a bald head, he looked like a great heel with the long hair. He looked so much younger. And that wasn't a good thing for that character. He just looked like some, big kid with the long hair, and then with the bald head, he looked like this menacing heel. So that was a real good deal for him. The Dallas stuff, he really shined on his promos in Dallas. He was there he was part of the angle actually with that led to the Ric Flair Kerry Von Erich cage match, because he was, as the story went, he was the guy who delivered the check, the bounty check, to injure Kerry Von Erich. When I'm trying to remember who was. I mean, maybe it was whoever it was that did the injury to Von Erich, and I think So the story was that Gary Hart gave him the check, and then he gave the check to Ric Flair, and then he had a falling out with Gary Hart, so he went back to Fritz and said that I could prove that Gary Hart put a bounty out or that Ric Flair put a bounty out, and Gary Hart was collecting the bounty on Kerry, and so they would have this. He brought this like photostat of this check, and it was like a $10,000 check from Ric Flair, which was great because it was spelled R-I-C-K Flair, not R-I-C, but to Gary Hart, and they did this interview segment. It was really fantastic interview segment where it was Fritz and Gary Hart, and they're going back and forth, and then like Fritz produces the check that Bundy sold to him for $10,000 or $5,000 or whatever it was, and Hart's just shocked that Fritz actually has the evidence, and then Fritz goes to the NWA and they see this, and they ordered that that Flair would have to come in and defend the title against Kerry Von Erich on Christmas night, and that this time they would be able to name the stipulations, the time and the place. So they named Christmas night at Reunion Arena, and a cage match, and 2 referees, and that they would get to pick the referees or something. So David Manning was one ref, and they let the fans pick the other ref. So the fans got to pick between like 3 or 4 guys, one of whom was Michael Hayes, who was a babyface at the time, and the fans picked Michael Hayes, who then in fact turned on Kerry Von Erich. So it was part of this long, elaborate Gary Hart storyline. That booking, the booking of all of this was just phenomenal, and set the territory on fire. Although Gary Hart was no longer there at the time when the territory got hot, nor was Bundy. Bundy was already gone by that point, or was leaving and going to Mid-South. So, they did a good job of getting Bundy over in Mid-South. They put him over Butch Reed, and they had him squash all those people with the 5 counts and everything. And I think that he wrestled Junkyard Dog and pinned him, did like some big splash move. And with a guy that size in that era, all you had to do was kind of like fall on the guy, and everyone thought it was like a believable finish. So he fell on JYD, and they count to 4, and he kicks out at 4. So that was kind of like what got that feud going.
So this is probably a stupid question, but since we have to talk about a couple of other Hall of Famers that are going in this year, why was he never put in the WWE Hall of Fame?
I don't know why you're asking me these questions. You know the answer.
I know. It's just, he was... Vince
didn't like him. Which
that's my question. Like, what was...
Granted, Vince puts in a lot of guys he doesn't like.
Sure, but everyone goes in.
There's no answer.
He was around. He was a WrestleMania main eventer. They need bodies in there.
There's no answer. There's no answer. That's your answer. There's no answer. There's no reason why anyone goes in. There's no reason why anyone doesn't go in. So he just didn't go in.
The reason they go in is just to put him in.
Yeah. They could have. There's no reason to do it. There's no reason not to do it. He was a bigger star than a lot of the guys in. But hell, there's a lot of guys that were bigger stars than a lot of the guys in that aren't in. So, there's no answer to that.